This episode of Israel Policy Pod was recorded before the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. For Israel Policy Forum's latest updates and analysis, subscribe to our emails at israelpolicyforum.org/subscribe or at the link in the show notes.
Shalom and welcome to the Israel Policy Pod. I'm Neri Zilber, a journalist based in Tel Aviv and a policy advisor to Israel Policy Forum. We have an important episode this week with our good friend Tal Schneider, who is back with us. Tal is, of course, the chief political correspondent at the Times of Israel and Zman Israel. You may have noticed that we've had less purely political podcasts over the past year for obvious reasons. It was almost always about military affairs during wartime. It's an interesting thing reporting here in Israel. During election season, the political reporters are indeed the stars. During a war, the military reporters and Palestinian affairs reporters are the most prominent figures in the news. Last year, during the judicial overhaul, everyone was trying to get a hold of legal analysts and constitutional law experts. And back during the COVID pandemic, all the public health officials and epidemiologists had spokespeople, teams of spokespeople, just because of the demand. I say all that to say this: there's a reason why I wanted an expert on Israeli politics to come on this week, even during wartime. Let's get to Tal Schneider. Hi Tal, welcome back to the podcast. It's been way too long.
Hi Neri, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, Tal. There's a lot to discuss this episode on Israeli politics. It's not like politics went away over the past year since October 7th, far from it, as we both know, but it seemed like we were mostly focused on the war across the various fronts, the hostages, U.S.-Israel relations, etc. All of it had to do with politics, but now it seems like politics is back in a very real way and a very, some might say, dangerous and existential way once again here in Israel. So I wanted to start here, Tal, with a look back, if you could. The last few weeks have seen several significant developments on the political front. We had the dramatic firing of Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on November 5th, election day in America. And then the Likud's Israel Katz was appointed the new defense minister. And then Gideon Sa'ar and a small right-wing opposition faction called New Hope, ironically enough, they officially defected from the opposition to the Netanyahu coalition. So if anything, the governing coalition is now bigger with Sa'ar, and Gallant is gone from the government for now, at least. So these were the two big wins and achievements for Netanyahu politically in recent weeks, no?
Yeah, I mean, if you call a defense minister firing during a war a win, I wouldn't call it like that. But obviously, the joining of four people from New Hope, or they call themselves now right-wing Mamlahti faction, sort of, they joined in ditching opposition, but also maneuvering and leaving behind many of the things that they promised and said. This group was all about never Bibi or toppling Bibi and so on. And they just, switched sides. And I ran into the now Foreign Affairs Minister Gideon Sa'ar in the Knesset on Monday. And he was all cheerful and told me, how good I'm doing. I'm doing really good. I'm happy where I am. Stuff like that. I didn't even ask about it, but he was, forthcoming with whatever he thinks is going on. Obviously, when you do foreign affairs ministry, you have to remember that this is Netanyahu and Dermer file. Gideon Sa'ar is nowhere to be allowed to touch any of the U.S.-Israel relationship. So this is foreign ministry in Israel. It's never about United States. It's always about other things. It's not a huge ministry. It's not very important, but he's very happy from where he is. And Netanyahu obviously has been embraced and having I suppose you can call it better times, because the numbers for his own party, the Likud, are rising. It doesn't mean that the numbers for the entire coalition are rising, but he feels better about himself. A year and almost 2 months since the beginning of the war, you see him more stable, if you can call it like that.
That's right. So according to the polls, the Likud has stabilized and is kind of inching back up to where it was maybe before October 7th. Not all the way there, by the way. But as you said, the current iteration of the ruling coalition, the Netanyahu government, is still far below the opposition in opinion polling, which isn't a minor point. There's a lot of doom and gloom, but the public is still not quite fully or majority behind this government. We'll get to that in a second, that whole issue of kind of where the public is at. In terms of Gideon Sa'ar, Tal, it really was remarkable to me that this person who broke very publicly with Netanyahu back in December of 2022, I think, or 2020, maybe, and he quit the Likud. He said, this is a cult of personality. Netanyahu was dangerous for the party and for the country. He went into opposition. He joined with Benny Gantz last time around. He very much kind of was a prominent opposition figure and leader and a major critic of the government. And then all of a sudden, over the past, say, 2 months, he flipped completely.
So I think he left Likud way before that, and he was all about bringing down Netanyahu. He was the architect behind the changed government, at which, Naftali Bennett was the prime minister. He was the one who was able to put it together. He went into coalition with, right-wing, religious right-wing, to liberals, to lefties, and even to the Islamic party, Ra'am. It was all put together with him behind the scene, with his, very skillful politicians, tactician. But since the beginning of the war, he said, we have to put everything behind us. And, they joined into the government together with Benny Gantz. As you said, he entered into the Knesset on Benny Gantz's back. And then he went into government behind Benny Gantz, and then put an ultimatum saying, if I don't get a real job in the government, I'm out. So he left around probably February or so. I can't remember the dates, but he left a couple of months into the war. After he said, this is so crucial to be in government during war, he left it and then back in, and now as a foreign affairs minister. So, you see the flipping and the changing of atmosphere. And, after years of preaching to everyone that Netanyahu is so dangerous to this country, he just, flipped all the way back. And now Netanyahu is the, most important person because of the Iranian threat. This is according to him.
Yes, he's trying to justify it on all kinds of various grounds, national security, the war, Iran, he wants to influence. But really, this is, let's call it for what it is, political opportunism. Sa'ar and his small faction were nowhere near the electoral threshold for entry into the Knesset, according to the opinion polls. So they were in real danger of, having their political careers end if, when a new election came. But really, in terms of principles, even political principles, is this the worst example of flip-flopping and kind of selling your soul to the highest bidder that you can remember, Tal? Because I can't remember anything quite like this, and this is Israeli politics, and there are really, really a lot of examples for this.
There's many examples, but he is one of the most prominent because he was heading a party. He was very successful, by the way, justice minister. So I remember other examples from people who were down the ladder in their prominence, and this is also because he had good connections with the press, we have to say that. So he was, briefing behind the scene for many years. And he said things on the record on TV screens against Netanyahu for so many years. So, it's opportunism, as you said, and saving his own political future, which, it's hard for me to predict at the moment, but I would say that it will not save his own political future. This is probably he will probably end as a footnote in history, I think.
Yeah, I think Netanyahu may have promised him the ability to rejoin Likud. I think that was the big win for Sa'ar and his people, on top of the ministries that they received from Netanyahu. But I don't know too much about internal Likud politics, but I don't know if they're going to forgive Sa'ar for the past few years.
Probably not.
Turning his back on the great leader. He thinks maybe he can convince them otherwise. Remains to be seen, but it was just remarkable. And really this just strengthens Netanyahu's coalition. So now he has four more seats in the Knesset. In terms of other achievements, which you I think rightfully said was not an achievement, but I guess politically for Netanyahu it was, the firing of Yoav Gallant. And now Israel Katz is a defense minister in the middle of a war, a multi-front war. I mean, I've talked about it in the last few episodes of the podcast, but I wanted to get your sense of why you think the reaction by the public was so muted, so small to the firing of Gallant on November 5th, earlier this month, compared to last year. We remember the night of Gallant in March of 2023. It was, hundreds of thousands took to the streets.
I think the Israeli public is worn out. You have many people who are serving on reserve duty since October 7th. You have a country traumatized. People are in mourning. Everybody knows someone who has been either killed or wounded. And most of the people are just, completely worn out. You have a region of around 1 million people who about 100,000 are internally evacuated, but then an entire region of 1 million people who cannot even get out of their houses due to rockets and daily rockets. So businesses are falling down in the entire upper northern region of the country. And overall, I think the situation of the Israeli citizen is just, they're really tired. You can plan demonstrations and then you have 200 rockets. So how can you, a country under war is a country under stress. People are stressed. They're losing jobs. They're losing their, small businesses in the northern area of the country. And if you don't have, you have, probably everyone has someone who is on mandatory service or on reserve service. So I think people are just really having difficulties of daily lives.
Yeah, I think I was mentioning to someone the other day that a big part of the protest movement in 2023 were the reservists. And if you're a reservist, whether you're at home, that's one thing. I mean, obviously, if you're on the front or serving, that's another. You can't show up to a demonstration. But even if you're at home, you may not have been home for a few months. It's going to be very difficult to tell your wife and kids, hey, I'm going to Kaplan or to whatever junction and I'm going to demonstrate tonight and, leave the house. Like you said, it's difficult to, I think, physically get people out on the streets, which I imagine Netanyahu is banking on, right? Like he was biding his time and he picked maybe the right night to fire Gallant.
Yeah, probably. And also there were talks about Gallant firing for like a month ahead of time or maybe even more than that. So when it happened, people were, public opinion were sort of prepared for that. So the shock was not as big as it was on March 2023. And this is the exact same point as we see right now. There is a lot of discussion about sacking the attorney general and sacking the head of the Shabak, Ronen Bar. And in both cases, I think since the discourse is so intensive about sacking them, when it will happen, if it will happen, then you won't see a public outrage because it's not a shock anymore. So Netanyahu knows very well how to play with public discourse, and he is sort of preparing the grounds right now for the next two sackings.
Yeah, we're going to get to the potential sackings, additional sackings in just a moment. But I think you're right, Tal. He's preparing the ground. He's normalizing the firing of maybe the Attorney General, maybe the head of Shin Bet, maybe the head of the IDF, Herzi Halevi. We'll get to that in a second. I wanted to just touch on the figure of Israel Katz, our new defense minister, such as he is. What can you tell our listeners about Israel Katz? And do you think how shall I put this? Do you think he's really going to be the defense minister, or is he just a cat's paw or like a yes man for Netanyahu in that very, very important position?
So Israel Katz has been a professional politician for many, many years. And he was Minister of Transportation for like 10 years straight, and then Foreign Affairs Minister and Finance Minister. In both jobs, it was not very prominent or important. As a finance minister, he was doing exactly what Netanyahu told him, including not putting forward the budget, which sent the country into a shutdown. This is not the same as an American shutdown. It's a bit different. They did it on purpose during COVID, which was hurtful to the people and to the economy, and it was like the wrong thing to do. But he was explaining that and continuing with that for political apparatus. Netanyahu wanted to sack Benny Gantz and not to abide by the coalition agreement at the time would send Benny Gantz to be a prime minister. So in order to play around that, Israel Katz did everything Netanyahu asked him to do. Now, having said that, playing with Israel budget and playing with Israel economy is severe by itself, but it's not as bad as playing with Israel's security. Israel Katz has somewhat of a security background because of his many roles as many ministers' roles in Netanyahu's cabinet through the years. He sat on the security cabinet for many years, but he hasn't been touching specifically directly in the security apparatus. And now, as you all know, this is the security budget of Israel. It's the biggest budget. This is life and death we're talking about. It doesn't have direct experience. It doesn't know the military officers by name, or it doesn't have his own military credential. I think he was just a plain officer in the parachuters many years ago. This is not high rank. This is very low rank, but an officer. So it doesn't bring on the personal credentials, if you may. He does bring in this sort of sitting in the security cabinet through the years. So, I mean, my answer to you would be halfway. I mean, he's not really perfect for the job, but he's not completely clueless, if you may.
I think that's a fair assessment. I'm more curious whether he has the ability or will to disagree with Netanyahu. If Netanyahu wants to do X in terms of, I don't know, a military operation or overall strategy, and Israel Katz may have a different idea, along with maybe the generals. Do you see him?
I would say that, right now, no. Right now, he would probably, as a new minister on the job, he would probably do whatever Netanyahu asked for. But down the road, if Netanyahu will be politically weakened in a way, or if something will happen, Israel Katz, as many politicians, will think first of Israel Katz. So I wouldn't call him like a complete puppet of Netanyahu. Having said that, the current political atmosphere is probably, and is the lack of credentials, he will probably play along with what Netanyahu is asking for.
And we should remember that it was a couple of years ago now, but Israel Katz used to be an adversary in Likud terms, but still an adversary to Netanyahu inside the party. But I suppose they mended their differences. And it's striking to me, both in terms of the firing of Gallant and Israel Katz being promoted to the defense minister, and also how Netanyahu was able to tempt Gideon Sa'ar and his people back into the coalition, how Netanyahu actually always manages to find the one thing these people want, and then he's able to deliver it to them. So Gideon Sa'ar obviously wanted to survive politically, and he wanted to come back into the Likud, so Netanyahu, I guess, offered him a pathway to that. And Israel Katz wanted a more high-profile position to elevate himself publicly and inside the Likud. And the opposition, for a while now, has not been able to do any of that with people they've been trying to attract away from the government.
So I think Israel Katz did not want to leave his foreign affairs ministry because he just started there less than a year ago. So he didn't want to jump from one place to another. But the public objection to Sa'ar taking on the defense world was so huge, was so big that, there was like outcry because Sa'ar has absolutely no background whatsoever. So people said, I'm not going to put the life of my sons in Sa'ar's hands and so on. And there was also huge objection inside the Likud because the Likud hate him. As we said, he was the no Bibi type for so many years, and the Likud people, the top Likud people said, how come you going to grant him with this amazing opportunity to be a defense minister of the state of Israel? So I think Israel Katz, it's not like, obviously it's a step up for him. As I said, Foreign Affairs Ministry is Israel is being, weakened by the prime minister, and defense minister, you can't really take the authority from the defense minister. So Katz, he took on this opportunity, but also please remember that as a defense minister, you may have huge failure. As we all know, the situation in Israel is very, very dire. And Netanyahu will easily, drop everything on a defense minister if he wants to. So it's not without, risks, right?
Right. That's a good point too. That the foreign ministry, Israel Katz, the most dangerous thing he did was issue a bunch of tweets attacking all kinds of foreign figures. The defense minister actually has real world.
Exactly. And I want to remind you for our listeners, something very important about Israel Katz. As a transportation minister, back in the days, we're talking about around 2011, 2013, Israel Katz came with this huge plan, a civilian transportation plan on how to deal with Gaza. Now, this plan was how to build offshore businesses and offshore transportation hubs, big one for Gaza. He came up with this plan. It's all you can Google it. It's, they put out together really, I would say, interesting and maybe even beautiful plan for the future of Gaza. It came out from this prominent minister in the Likud. Netanyahu never really cared for that plan. But Israel Katz went from, one media outlet to the other, presenting his vision. And he had a vision. The vision was very interesting with the transportation and offshore airports and so airports with security measures. And his point in the case was, we as Israelis, we have to take care of the Palestinian economy because we want to, direct them into profitable jobs and into life of, prosperity. We don't want them to be in the hands of a terror organization. So he had this vision. It's not a security vision. It's more of a civilian vision, but it's a good one, an interesting one. Obviously, everything was, it's in the shambles. It's not going to happen. But as a person, Israel Katz was not, altogether just a waste of time. He had ideas back in the days. So
he is, when he wants to be a strategic, I don't want to say visionary, but he
could have been
able to put, he is able to put forward a coherent strategic vision, right or wrong. Interesting point. And Tal, just on the issue of what we've seen in recent weeks, the failure of the opposition to actually attract defectors, and Netanyahu actually being the one able to attract defectors away from the opposition. What is your assessment of the opposition?
Yeah, from what I've heard, Gideon Sa'ar was playing them, was actually, maneuvering them. He was trying to cut a deal with some of them, and then he took the content of that deal and went to Netanyahu and said, "If you're not going to give me A, B, C, then I'm with them." It put Netanyahu on the spot and managed to, like when you are interviewing for a job and you go to the person you want to have a job with and you tell him, I have an offer from the other one. Something like that. I mean, as I said, Gideon Sa'ar is a skillful politician, he's always been like that. It doesn't mean that he's a great statesman. And also, as we talked about his flipping on Netanyahu, but he saw the problem with his party. He was not able to get any public support. And he was seizing on the momentum, just trying to go into Netanyahu's hands.
Very interesting. So your contention is that he wanted to go back into the government, into the coalition, into Likud, and his attempts to cut a deal with Naftali Bennett or Avigdor Lieberman or someone else in opposition was just a leverage play.
Yeah, that's what everybody's saying, the hindsight. But, opposition in Israel is very weak. What can they offer him, right? Can they offer him a job? Can they offer? They can't offer anything. They have no powers. They are minority in the Knesset. They are unable to put forward any bills. All of their legislative steps are doomed to fail because the coalition is controlling completely the apparatus and the Knesset, the Israeli parliament way of doing business. So they have no, even the filibuster in Israel has almost no powers. So it's not, they can't really offer anything, and we don't have election in the near future. So if we were into a campaign, they would be able to offer him something. But Netanyahu is the prime minister, and he was chosen just 2 years ago. So it's not like they can offer him anything.
Right. I was thinking maybe, just make sure or offer him a spot in your party like he took with Benny Gantz. And I don't know, from reports, it seemed like Gideon Sa'ar was asking for too much just based on his non-existent public support. And the other opposition leaders didn't want to meet his price. And that's how he got to.
Well, they all deny it, but who knows?
Okay, we'll be right back after this brief message.
Over 400 days since Hamas's October 7th terror invasion, and with 101 Israeli hostages still held in Gaza, the multi-front war, the Israeli-Palestinian arena, and Israeli politics face increasing upheaval. During this period of uncertainty, Israel Policy Forum experts are shedding light on complex policy issues and breaking down news developments impacting Israel's future as secure, Jewish, and democratic. In recent days, we've published a handful of timely explainers, including on the new Knesset legislation curbing UNRWA's activities, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant's firing, the stolen documents scandal roiling the Prime Minister's office, a deep dive into Hezbollah and how it functions within Lebanese society and Iran's proxy network, and an overview of the various missile, drone, and rocket threats Israel faces and the systems it has to defend against them. Links to all of these resources can be found in the show notes of this podcast. If you rely on Israel Policy Forum for credible, nuanced analysis, please make a gift today so that our work can continue to have an impact. Donate now at ipf.li/supportthepod or at the Support the Show link in the show notes.
Let's get to the current moment, Tal. You and I both live here in Israel, and I can't stress to those listeners outside of Israel how much the current debate over the last week or so has been on two big and related issues, not about the wars per se, but about the return of the judicial overhaul to our lives, unfortunately, and then the speculation about all those potential firings of the Attorney General, Gali Barav Miara, the Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar, and the IDF chief Herzia Levi. Let's start with the potential firings, because that's the big and potentially dramatic news, maybe in the coming days, weeks, or months. How seriously do you take these rumors and reports, and even not just rumors and reports, there are active calls by major figures in the government to fire some or all of these people that I mentioned?
Yeah, we take them seriously because, as I said earlier, we think that the discourse and the threats that are being thrown at her, at Gali Barav Miara, the Attorney General, we think that all of those threats are just laying the ground, preparing the public, opinion, and preparing the case against her. I would say technically it's not an easy step. They need to convene one of those committees. Netanyahu doesn't have a majority in that committee, as far as we know. There's too many people missing in that committee that is supposed to sack her, if you may. He needs to appoint 2 more people to that committee. It's not easy to find them because one of them has to be a former justice minister. The other one has to be, there's all of those rules. It's not easy to find a person that will willfully go into that and do whatever Netanyahu wants him to do. So I would say it's not an easy maneuver. Having said that, obviously we see a huge clash between her and the government on a daily basis. Yesterday, I was at the Judicial Committee of the Knesset where she appeared for the first time in many years, a public appearance, and a very uncomfortable setting with all of those members of the Knesset yelling at her, making threats at her directly when she sits in front of them. This is not, the committee that you see in the Senate, that even if, or Senate or the House, that even if the words are harsh, there is some sort of a respectful way of doing
decorum.
business. Yeah, here it's like how would you say, like carnival, like an ambush. It's very
Yeah.
unpleasant, and the setting, the setting in the room is much more intimate. So they just basically sit on a table next to her and throw at her so many harsh words, even on a personal level. She sat there with her face, how would you say? She ignored them. She didn't move her face. She didn't react. She was not dragged down to the level of discourse. She was very respectful, but obviously the entire situation was very uncomfortable. The members of the Knesset got their headlines, big headlines. These members of the Knesset, Moshe Saada is calling for sacking her. Tali Gottlieb is calling her incompetent and sacking her, and so on and so forth. So they got their headlines, and they got to put their way through into the, news, the evening news, mentioning their names. She did not react to any of that. She was there with her, senior staff. All of them were mum about any type of political, situation. They came along to do their job. They were talking about Justice Ministry, the criticism against Justice Ministry for not doing enough on the
violent crime.
crime in the Arab society inside Israel,
Yeah.
which is a big issue by itself.
But they were trying to blame it all on her.
Right.
And not say on the minister responsible for the police, like Itamar Ben-Gvir.
And the entire panel was completely off tracks. And they never, the members of the Knesset and the chairman of the committee were not dealing really with that. They were after her on a personal level. So it was a tough thing to watch. But she continued on. I mean, she's moving on. She's not even letting them drag her into that quarrel.
Good for her. Remarkable woman and remarkable public servant. And just for our listeners, Moshe Saada and Tali Gottlieb are prominent in the worst way possible members of Likud. Very, how should we say, outspoken and very, let's put it this way, they do a lot of Netanyahu's dirty work.
Very aggressive with the choice of words. Gottlieb actually was, raising her voice, really yelling at her. You have no criminal experience. You are incompetent. You need to go as soon as possible. We don't want you here. I mean, really taking it to a level of, as if they're campaigning, but they are campaigning all the time. So it was a very hard scene to see.
And in terms of actually firing an attorney general, which to the best of my information hasn't really been done in Israeli history ever, you need to convene this committee, this external committee that has to weigh in on the merits of firing an attorney general. And then I suppose even if this committee decides one way or the other, and the government may still go ahead and fire Gali Bar of Miara, it'll likely go to the Supreme Court, right, Tal? And there's a massive conflict of interest between a government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a prime minister but also on trial for various counts of corruption, firing essentially the country's lead prosecutor. So it'll have to go to the Supreme Court, right?
So Netanyahu has a conflict of interest. He signed a conflict of interest paper back in, around when his trial began, like 3 or 4 years ago. And he's not supposed to deal with anything that, relating to judicial appointee and so on. Having said that, about a month ago, the Justice Minister Yariv Levin complained during a cabinet meeting about the Attorney General, and Netanyahu told him, if you are complaining, then you deal with that. And, what do you mean by deal with that? Even that comment may be considered as bypassing his conflict of interest paper. He's not supposed to even react to that. This is not for him to make decisions on her firing. If there will be a committee set up for her sacking, again, he has to nominate 2 people in that committee. So who will do that? It's really complicated. I don't know what to tell you. We do see here a clash between, powers of the government, right? A clash between, there's supposed to be a separation of power, but we see this kind of a total mix of the powers in a very bad way for Israel's democracy. sacking an attorney general. It's never happened before. And if it will proceed, it will be a big, I think a big hurdle for Israel to go on and claim we are a full abiding law democracy. So
right, which was the whole issue 2023 before the war with the judicial overhaul, that the
sacking of the attorney
branch,
general may come up to what we call a putsch, not a putsch against the government, it's kind of a putsch,
by the government
sacking. This is not the United States. Attorney General here, it's not a personal appointee by the Prime Minister. He is not, the Attorney General of Israel, he or her, are not there to serve the Prime Minister. They are to serve the country. And this is what she's doing very bravely. And I think her manners are not confrontational. She's not lashing, but obviously the letters she sends, the things that she say are uncomfortable to the government. And instead of, she's putting on the spot some places where the government doesn't adhere to the law, to the written law. And instead of saying the government, instead of saying, okay, we shall adhere to the law, they are saying you are to be blamed for everything. So it's very unpleasant.
It's uncomfortable because this government is trying to do illegal and unconstitutional things, and she just happens to be the attorney general telling them that it's illegal and unconstitutional, and they don't like to hear it. By the way, in terms of the other two public officials that I mentioned, the head of Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, and the head of the IDF, Herzi Halevi, the process to get rid of them is more straightforward, right?
So this is a different case. As Israelis and as the press, we do put a lot of blame on both of these security leaders for the mass failure of October 7th. Obviously, with the government, with the prime minister, and with the defense minister, and the chief IDF, and the Shin Bet head, all four are completely responsible for this horrific massacre that the Israeli people went through on October 7th. At the beginning, right after October 7th, all of them said, we will step down, we will go. No one hearing, the prime minister did not say it, but Netanyahu, but obviously the military leaders, they did say it. And none of the Israeli really thought, if you look back on October 7th, that 14 months later, they will be on their jobs. Mm-hmm. So basically, they need to go. They failed us completely. The two of them, both Herzi Halevi and Ronen Bar. Again, the prime minister failed us even on a larger scale, I would say. Now, within those months that passed, they decided not to just resign because they understood that the prime minister was trying to take over the narrative, trying to take over. He wants to put the entire 100% blame on them, which is obviously not the correct answer. You all need to go, including the prime minister. But since the prime minister is trying to topple everything on the military ranks and on the Shabak ranks, so both leaders, security leaders, decided to wait with their stepping down, wait a bit, because they figured something worse can happen. Netanyahu can tap into, for example, the Shabak, Shin Bet, this is like CIA, can tap someone who is a total loyalist, and then we will even never get to know the facts on the grounds of what's going on. Things will be hidden, things will be, manipulated, things will be maneuvered. So I think both Herzi Halevi and Ronen Bar decided to stay in. But again, the prime minister can, start a process of sacking them, and it will not be a complete shock for the Israelis because, I think the majority of the people do believe that they need to go. The problem is who will come next.
Yes, the problem is who will be appointed next by this prime minister, who will be, I guess, in his mind, the only one remaining of those responsible for October 7th. Mm-hmm. So Gallant is gone, and Herzi Halevi and Ronen Bar may be gone, and maybe additional generals in the IDF, and yet the prime minister responsible for the entire system and the entire country will remain, well, in his mind, maybe forever.
Right.
Unacceptable to many Israelis, and like you said, I think it's the fear of the security chiefs to leave these appointments and these organizations in the hands of Bibi Netanyahu and his loyalists. I think that's the major fear. But you raise a good point in the sense that, if they're already leaving, then maybe it won't be that big of a public uproar if he actually fires them. But it remains to be seen. Do you think that if this government goes after the Attorney General or the Shin Bet chief or the IDF chief of staff, that the public reaction will be greater than what we saw with Gallant a few weeks ago?
I don't know. I think all of the, press trying to predict what the public will do, it's not something that we can really predict. I do see the Israeli public really worn out from everything. This year has been horrific. So people are trying to get their life together, to see their kids, to make sure that the loved ones are, going back safe home. I don't think they see now for the obviously you always have, major groups that will demonstrate, but I think that one of the issues right now is the demonstrations are not leading to any type of pressure on Netanyahu. He sees those demonstrations and he says, okay, I'll just wait another day and tomorrow will be better. He doesn't really care. So I'm here. He says to himself, I'm here until October 26th. There is no reason to stress about demonstrations. You get, huge coverage in worldwide media about the demonstrations. And Netanyahu, thinks to himself, fine, okay, there was the demonstrations, but I'm here tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And there is like this game of the press trying to say, oh, there were 200,000 people. Oh, there were 500,000 people. All right. And Netanyahu sees those reports and says, fine, but I still, no one can take me off from my office, even if you have 200,000 people in the street. And this is the way it is for a long time now. I mean, it started during COVID, right? With people taking to the streets against the government. And since then, we've seen mass. I don't want to say that the demonstrations are not helping, because obviously with the judicial overhaul, the demonstrations actually stopped the overhaul. But I do not think the demonstrations can topple a government, at least not for now.
Right. There's no actual mechanism to translate mass public protests and even opinion polling that goes against the government into the actual toppling of the government, early elections.
And obviously there is a huge public discourse going on the right wing or on the center, how the demonstrations are actually helping the Hamas, because the Hamas wants people to demonstrate because they want them to kind of ruin the country from within. So Netanyahu uses that all the time. He's preaching against those demonstrators with the Hamas agenda. And he also helped manipulate some of the documents that coming out of Gaza in order to put the demonstrators on the spot, including families of the hostages.
Yes, I didn't want to get into all of that, but the ongoing investigations and scandal having to do with the Prime Minister's office and the stealing and then leaking of classified documents, which, by the way, is also being investigated by the Shin Bet, which may be yet another reason for Netanyahu to try
exactly.
to get rid of. But then we'll spare our listeners.
Very complicated, but this is what's going on.
Yeah, I'm sure some of our listeners have heard about it and are following it, but we'll leave it for now until there's kind of a major development with those investigations. And I mean, you set me up well for my next question, Tal. The judicial overhaul writ large seems to be back in our lives. Yariv Levin, Netanyahu's justice minister, said so on Sunday. He wrote a post and said, I want to bring back these plans. I want support from the entire coalition. It's time to move ahead once again with these judicial overhaul plans that had been stopped. Does that concern you? I mean, like you said, last time around in 2023, they were stopped by a massive, unprecedented, historic protest movement for 9 straight months all across Israel. Now, what do we have to tell our listeners that you're skeptical whether we can re-galvanize the public against it if Yariv Levin and the others go start moving forward with these plans once again?
They're already moving forward. They passed a bill today or the other day at the plenum to take some of the budget or the authority of Israel's Bar Association, for example. At the moment, as I said, it's hard to get the Israeli public out of their houses when you have rockets all over the country. People are afraid for their lives. When you have, rockets and you caught on driving, or when there's an area of gathering and you may see the siren on, it's really, I mean, can you blame them for for staying indoors, very close to the shelters? Stuff. It's almost impossible. I mean, the country is under constant attack coming in from east, north, south. Rockets are being shot from the east and from the south on Eilat. You can't really expect people to just be on their foot and run out and be active when you need to take care of the kids and put them in the shelter.
I mean, it's a fair point, not to belabor that point, but it is a real issue, right? The psychology of actually getting people out on the streets and the mechanisms of mass popular demonstrations. It's not easy, especially during wartime. But in terms of Yariv Levin and the government, do you see them actually moving ahead with a lot of the stuff they had planned in 2023? Like, for instance, rejigging and reformulating the way judges are appointed, things like that would really cut to the core of Israel's judicial system and really the Supreme Court.
So the appointment of Supreme Court president is stuck, and Yariv Levin is the justice minister. He's putting everything to a halt. He doesn't even talk to the president of the Supreme Court. He doesn't talk to the Israel chairman of the Bar Association. I don't recall ever such an atmosphere between the branches of the government. Israel Bar Association under the law has judicial role in the committee. The chairman of Israel's Bar Association was thrown out physically from a committee, the Constitution Committee in the Knesset today, by the chairman, Rotman, also one of the people who promote this judicial overhaul. So he threw him out. He ordered the guards of the Knesset to just send him out. I've never seen anything like that. It's unheard of.
Not surprising, because it's Simcha Rotman. If anybody knows anything about him, he's a true believer in the judicial overhaul. And yes, it is all quite concerning. I'm just more curious whether they're going to really move ahead full steam with all the stuff or much of the stuff that they had planned. I think it really depends on Bibi Netanyahu. Always a question what he actually wants to do. And also, Tal, and this is going to be our final question, it may depend on the incoming U.S. president, Donald Trump, who we're all waiting for once he takes office officially in January. What's your sense of the Trump effect so far vis-a-vis both Israel and domestic Israeli politics, if there is one, and also maybe big picture in terms of possible deals in Lebanon, Gaza, what you think Trump may want to get done in the Middle East? How do you assess Trump now, 2 weeks after the U.S. election?
So as per the judicial overhaul in Israel, I think they got a boost of confidence. They think that Trump will never say or do anything about, any change. I mean, he's trying to promote his own changes, his own constitutional change. So they count on him not to even entertain any thoughts about that, as opposed to what Biden did. He will not issue a statement that he cares about Israel's demonstrators and Israel's liberal and lefty crowds, that's for sure. As per Iran and Lebanon and Gaza, I think this situation is different from what they dim. I don't think that he will go along with everything they want. They're fantasizing about annexation, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. I don't know what Trump will do, but my gut tell me that it will not go into that direction. Trump has his the deal of the century. It's all written and out in the open. Everyone can Google and go and read it. It has a two-state solution, some sort of maybe like a state minus, something that Israel's right-wing and the Likud completely rejected. Netanyahu did not reject it. Obviously, he was actually embracing it. But his people were rejecting it completely. Obviously, the things have changed since the war. I don't know if Trump can just pull out the same plan and ignore the war and the massacre that went on here. But I think on the Iranian front, Trump doesn't want spike in energy prices, and he doesn't want any type of China more, getting more power and more economic power. In order to get there, he probably won't allow Israel to attack Iranians' nuclear facilities, I suppose, in order not to get the energy prices up, in order to just kind of dismantle this axis of Russia, China, and Iran. We already see his, approach to Russia. It's probably part of a grand scheme not to allow the Russia government to keep on working with the Iranians and the Chinese. I don't know if he can get there, but obviously that's his goal. And that's the way I see the things, the way I estimate the way it's going forward.
Interesting. So despite what we hear from the Israeli far right and even senior government ministers, you're skeptical that Trump will give them just a blank check and everything they want, whether in terms of annexation in the West Bank, say, or attacking Iran. You think Trump will have a very different agenda?
I think that he wants an economic agenda first for the benefit of the United States. And in order to get there, you probably won't allow your closest ally to just go ahead and do whatever it wants in the Middle East. I mean, this is just a prediction. It's not like I called Trump and he told me so. But
I mean, I was asking the question, what does Bibi Netanyahu actually want? But the even more difficult question is what Donald Trump actually wants, because I don't, it may change day to day and tweet to tweet. It's
right.
Very difficult to get a sense of that. And by the way, really the final question to you, Tal, and maybe bring it back full circle. It was interesting to me before the U.S. election how many Israeli friends and acquaintances, let's say here in Israel, were so all in on Trump just because of the war and what they thought they knew and believed about the Biden administration and the war, and that even liberal Israelis that I spoke to very much wanted Trump to win. And now that he's won, I think they're all very happy, but I don't think anyone really took into account, and I didn't even appreciate it fully until maybe the past week, how much of an impact Trump's victory would have on domestic Israeli affairs, like the judicial overhaul. That all those liberal Israelis, many of whom, as we both know, Tal, went out and were demonstrating for 9 straight months last year against this government, now may not have an ally in the White House like they did in 2023. They may have won the battle in terms of the U.S. election and I suppose U.S. policy vis-a-vis the wars in Gaza and Lebanon, but not maybe the overall war for Israel's future as a democratic country.
So I'm not sure I completely understood the question, but I have to tell you this, and this is a good opportunity
Yes.
to say it. I think Israel should be thankful for the Biden administration. Not just thankful, but really very, very thankful for the Biden administration for what they did during those 14 months. In the history of this country, there's never have been such a huge help with everything: ammunition, diplomatic help, and strategic thinking. And, most of all, I think history will go down with this huge amount of help on the military side. We've never seen anything like that, even with some problems along the way during some of the
criticisms.
Part of the ammunition and so on. Even with that, when you look at the big numbers, it's truly unbelievable how big the help was. And you have to be really thankful for Biden and for his entire administration for that, Floyd's defense ministry. I think people here, they're just, turning a blind eye on that. They want to see everything in like black and white colors because they're upset about something he said or something Harris said. But I don't think they're going to get a free slate from Trump to do whatever they want. So time will tell, but I don't think everything is going to be a honeymoon with Trump. Well, we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. And I love the fact that you you flat out said, I didn't understand the question. That's fair. It was a long kind of half question. I guess my only point was that in terms of the domestic Israeli politics and liberal Israel is trying to stand up against this right-wing government, wanting to undermine Israeli democracy, it was very helpful in 2023 to have an ally in the White House in the form of President Biden.
It's gone.
And now that it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
And so all those people, those Israelis, even liberal ones who were cheering and very happy when Trump won, maybe didn't take that part of it into consideration.
That's true, but they're busy with survival. I'm going back to what I told you before. They're very busy with survival of their businesses, of their lives, of the attacks coming in from all sides. So I don't think they see it like that. They just, they just want the country to stand on its feet with respect to, they want to see hostages out. They want to see end of the wars. And if they get Trump on board with ending the war with Lebanon and ending the war in Gaza, I think they will be grateful to him as well.
Yeah, that's also a fair point. That is important to stress. It's still wartime in Israel, despite the fact that this government is dealing with a million other things unrelated to the war. Tal, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And for coming back on, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Sure, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Okay, thanks again to Tal Schneider, as always, for her generous time and insights. Also, a special thanks to our producer, Jacob Gilman, and to all of you who support Israel Policy Forum's work. Do consider making a donation to Israel Policy Forum, so keeping a credible source of analysis and ideas on issues such as these that we all care deeply about, including this podcast. And most importantly, thank you for listening.